Hi everyone, this is Lena and today we have a very important episode, and perhaps after watching it you're gonna change your opinion about Russian Empress Catherine the Great. She changed the course of the Russian history and the lives of millions of people. She went down in Russian history as the Enlightenment Empress. But was she such a champion of Russian people? Let's find out. When she was still the wife of an heir to the Russian throne, future Emperor Peter III, Catherine was getting to know a lot of important people and was actively making connections. These important people had helped her to grab power and to get rid of her husband, Emperor Peter III. When she became the Empress, she tried to safeguard her throne in all the ways possible. She had also never forgotten the people who helped her climb the ladder of success, but she made everything necessary to make sure to keep them as far from the throne as she only could. She legitimized her succession to the throne by being officially coronated as the Russian Empress in one of the cathedrals in the Moscow Kremlin in the year 1763. Right now, we believe is the perfect time to remind you of one certain person who we already talked about in episode 6. Someone Ivan, who became the legitimate ruler of Russia at the age of 4 but had fallen victim to the plot organized by Empress Elizabeth when she took over the throne and had him imprisoned in a secret location not far from St. Petersburg. He had spent all of his life in a jail cell. If you want to learn about this Ivan, we have an episode about palace coups and Empress Elizabeth. Once when Peter III was already an emperor, he had visited Ivan in prison. He didn't do that to help Ivan, but he was just curious to see his political opponent powerless. At the time, Ivan was already 22 years of age. When Catherine got rid of Peter and became the empress, she had also visited Ivan. She had absolutely no empathy for him, nor she had intention to help him to get out of the prison. When she was leaving the prison, she gave her personal order to the security guards that if there was an attempt to set Ivan free, they should kill him. And this was exactly what happened. Soon after, a group of soldiers tried to get him out of the prison and the guards killed him, just as Catherine told them to. She gave this order because even in prison, a political opponent who was a legitimate ruler of Russia was a big threat for Catherine. It's a historic fact that in the first year of her rule, they had discovered a plot against her, and then the conspirators wanted to enthrone Ivan instead of her. This worried her more than anything else because she was an illegitimate ruler of Russia and had no rights to the Russian throne. This way, Catherine had taken out 2 of her main political opponents, her husband, Peter III, and Ivan VI. Since her early days, Catherine the Great read a lot, and she loved French literature, and Voltaire was her #1 hero. When she became Russian Empress, she started writing him a lot of letters, and she had also reached out to other famous philosophers of her time. Talking to them, sharing opinions, discussing different ideas had influenced her a lot and had also influenced her political decisions on many occasions. After Voltaire's death, Catherine acquired all his library, and today that library is housed in the building behind my back. In her early years as an empress, she passed a lot of laws that reformed Russia and also reformed the Institute of Federal Power and passed the laws that made sure that from a legal standpoint, there was absolutely nothing challenging her rule. In our tours, when we show people around St. Petersburg, discussing the early days of the city and talking about Peter the Great, we usually say that Peter the Great was the one who made Russia a big navy power, the one who founded seaports in Russia, and the one who, by defeating Sweden, gave Russia an access to high seas in the north. And when we talk about Catherine the Great, we usually say that she was the one who gave Russia an access to high seas in the south by defeating Turkey, as well as Crimean Peninsula and the northern shores of the Black Sea. She made generals and field marshals such as Romanov and Suvorov famous. One of her favorites and perhaps even a secret husband, Grigory Potemkin, was a great general, and he also was a great statesman. In 1780s, in the newly acquired Crimea, he started a big, gigantic construction project. In a vast flat steppe land, he was building cities, fortresses, factories, canals, navy bases. They planted a lot of forests that all all became possible thanks to his endless energy. As many famous and great people, he was an extravagant character, and a lot of people called him weird, but all of them gave him credit for his achievements as a statesman, and a lot of people compared his persona to the personality of Peter the Great. He's also known as the inventor of the so-called Potemkin Village, which is a symbol of fraud and deceit and was a powerful propaganda trick. This village is a construction that is a facade to give an illusory appearance to the powerful and remote that a village, a society, a country or other province is thriving, peaceful and happy. This term derives from the propaganda exercise organized by Grigory Potemkin when Catherine the Great made a visit to Crimea in 1787. The recently conquered province still simmered with discontent and resistance, and yet while Empress Catherine traveled on the riverboat down the Dnieper River, Potemkin had arranged theatrical stage props that resembled thriving, peaceful, grateful villages to be constructed by the riverside. It gave the visiting empress the illusion of achieving the objectives, projecting power and developing the country. However, we have to give credit where credit is due. Potemkin had also constructed the Sebastopol fortress, founded the city of Simferopol, the city of Khersones, Odessa and other towns, as well as the Black Sea Fleet. The court of Catherine had also signed a lot of great deals with countries such as Austria, England, Prussia, Denmark and others. The French Revolution was terrorizing Europe at the time, and Russia had joined the monarchists, but had to balance carefully to make sure to not get in trouble with the revolutionaries. In 1773 to 1774, Russia was shaken by a serious rebellion that took the country by storm. At some point, the insurgents were about to march on Moscow. The leader of the insurrection was the impostor, someone named Emilian Pugachev, a Cossack from the River Don region who claimed to be the Emperor Peter III. The rebels were well armed and ready for action. The regular citizens were joining the rebels in masses because the rebels had promised that they would abolish serfdom, give all the lands to the farmers, prosecute all the landlords and corrupt bureaucrats. With the greatest difficulty, with the help of the regular army, and only after sending the Generalissimo Suvorov to fight the rebels, the empire had suppressed the rebellion. Pugachev and his entourage were all arrested and executed in Moscow. Catherine, however, understood the reasons that caused the rebellion, and she was trying to make sure that punishing the insurgents doesn't turn into a political vendetta. However, the court didn't follow her orders fully and still had sentenced the leader of the rebellion, Pugachev, to death through dismemberment, a type of execution when they first chopped the arms and legs off the condemned and then he's beheaded. Catherine had secretly ordered that the executioner doesn't follow the full protocol and beheaded him first and dismembered the body later. Until her dying day, Catherine worked on the Russian Constitution project. She understood the Constitution as the Bill of Rights for people of different social classes, including serfs, who were guaranteed a right to life, personal security, health, name, the presumption of innocence, and the right to have a lawyer represent them in the court of law. Talking about Catherine the Great, we of course cannot omit art, because it was she who founded Hermitage Museum, which is behind my back, the collection of world masterpieces, which were acquired by her, diplomats and ambassadors from private collections all over Europe. Today, Hermitage Museum is the largest and the well-known museum of Russia. Apart from the Hermitage Museum today in St. Petersburg, you can see that buildings in the historic center have different architectural styles, each reflecting the taste of the ruler behind a certain period of the Russian history. When Catherine came to power, the main architectural style had also changed. The Baroque style characteristic of the rule of Empress Elizabeth was changed with the solemn classical style. The whole historic center of St. Petersburg was being rebuilt because Catherine had an obsession with the construction. In 1782, Russia's favorite monument, Bronze Horseman, made by French sculptor Falcone, was unveiled. It still, after all these years, amazes us today. The art and Russian culture was taken to a whole new level, and Catherine got famous as the biggest patron of art and science in Russian history. The ideas of enlightenment, the power of knowledge, made people of those years realize that a new kind of man was about to emerge. This was an educated person, a perfect citizen, and a hard-working man. However, most of the population of the Russian Empire at the time could not afford the education. The court of Catherine would censor everything left and right because she was totally convinced that it is far more difficult to rule an educated and enlightened man who possesses the art of critical thinking. The last 2 years of Catherine's rule was the period of stagnation, as she was losing energy and could not implement her ideas as much as when she was young. The French Revolution that was destroying Europe at the time terrified her. She started to censor her citizens more and more. There's also another side of Catherine that people often talk about. She's considered as the queen of mischief, orgies, and parties. To this day, a lot of people spread rumors about her private life and her lovers. Just as usual, these rumors are blown out of proportion. Indeed, she had a lot of lovers, more than 24, but the 18th century was the time of mischief and free love. To be a faithful husband was considered strange, and love affairs were very common. On many occasions, Catherine admitted that she could not live without love, but she held an incredibly high standard, and none of her partners and lovers could live up to her expectations. As she was getting older, she could not part with the idea that she was obsessed with all her life. Take a man and educate him through her personal example, her enlightenment, and to raise a perfect life partner for herself. She failed time and time again. Her love affairs with young men who became her favorites disappointed her because her energy and ideals did not fascinate them at all, and one after another they became gigolos who would enjoy life as Empress's lovers, living a good life at the expense of the taxpayers. All through her life, Catherine would often write about the way she would have preferred to leave this world, surrounded by flowers, among friends, with the sweet sound of music playing in the background. But in reality, the way it happened wasn't even close to what she was hoping for. She had collapsed in a narrow passage between the two service rooms of her private suite in the Winter Palace. She had a massive stroke, dropped on the floor, and all her servants could do to help her was to drag her heavy body out of the passage into one of the rooms and place her on a mattress that they had put on the floor for her. Here, after hours of agonizing pain, she died without gaining consciousness. Catherine never left her last will, or perhaps it was destroyed after her death. We'll never know for sure. A lot of historians of her time and in the years after would discuss whether there was a last will written or not. We know for sure that she couldn't stand her own son, Grand Duke Paul. She considered him unfit to rule such country as Russia and would keep him away from the state affairs. Paul's son Alexander was Catherine's favorite grandson, and she was often thinking about how wonderful would it be that if after her death Russia was ruled by Alexander and not Paul. She would try to teach him everything that she knew. However, she would never talk about her plans publicly. Historians believe that she wrote an edict where the throne would be passed straight to Alexander, and that she would keep this document in her study. As soon as she had a stroke and died, her son Paul arrived to the Winter Palace, and after finding this document, he threw it into the fire burning in the mantelpiece. This fact is not documented, but we know for sure that the courtiers who were with him that night received all kinds of awards, titles, and patronage shortly after. So, that's about it. In short 15 minutes video, we've covered the longest ever rule in Russian history, 34 years. Next video is gonna be about Catherine the Great's son, Emperor Paul I. His rule was surrounded with mystery and plots, and next video promises to be very interesting. Thank you all for watching us. Please subscribe to our channel, follow us on Instagram, drop your likes everywhere, and see you soon!